The town of Blackthorn was known for its picturesque scenery and tranquil countryside. However, there was one place that every local knew to avoid: the fields of the old Blackthorn farm. Stories of haunted happenings and an evil presence lurking among the tall crops had been passed down through generations, warning anyone who dared to enter after dark. One warm summer evening, a group of college friends, eager for adventure and scoffing at the local legends, decided to investigate the haunted fields. Sarah, Mike, Lucy, and David armed themselves with flashlights, a camera, and a bundle of nerves masked by bravado. They parked their car near the dilapidated gate of the farm, the metal rusty and bent from years of neglect. The fields stretched out before them, rows of corn swaying gently in the night breeze. As they climbed over the gate, a sense of unease washed over Sarah, but she shook it off, determined to prove that the stories were just myths. "Let's stick together and keep the flashlights on," Mike suggested, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. They walked deeper into the fields, the tall corn stalks towering above them, casting long shadows that danced in the moonlight. The further they went, the more the night seemed to close in around them, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. "Look, it's just a field. Nothing spooky here," David said with a laugh, but his voice was strained. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the fields, making the corn sway violently. The air grew heavy, filled with the scent of earth and something rotten. Sarah shivered, feeling as if unseen eyes were watching them. "Did you guys hear that?" Lucy whispered, her eyes wide with fear. A faint, distant whispering seemed to come from all around them, growing louder and more insistent. The friends huddled together, shining their flashlights in every direction but seeing nothing beyond the endless rows of corn. "It's probably just the wind," Mike said, though he didn't sound convinced. They continued walking, the whispers following them, growing louder with each step. Suddenly, the flashlight beams flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled with the flashlights, but they wouldn't turn back on. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice trembling. They turned around, trying to retrace their steps, but the path they had taken seemed to have vanished. The corn stalks had closed in, creating a maze with no clear way out. The whispers grew louder, more frenzied, filling their minds with a cacophony of voices. In the darkness, they stumbled upon a scarecrow standing in the middle of a clearing. Its straw-stuffed body was draped in tattered clothes, its head a burlap sack with a sinister grin stitched onto it. The scarecrow seemed almost alive, its eyes gleaming malevolently in the moonlight. "I don't remember seeing this before," David said, his voice shaking. As they stared at the scarecrow, the whispers coalesced into a single, chilling chant. The friends backed away, but it felt as if an invisible force was holding them in place. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and they realized with growing horror that they were not alone. Shadowy figures emerged from the corn, their forms indistinct and ghostly. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and their faces were twisted in expressions of torment and rage. The friends screamed, trying to run, but their legs felt like lead. The scarecrow's grin widened, its burlap head twisting unnaturally to watch them. The figures drew closer, their whispers merging into one deafening, mind-numbing chant. Sarah felt a cold hand brush against her arm, and she cried out, stumbling backwards. "Run!" Mike shouted, breaking free from the paralysis of fear. They bolted through the fields, blindly crashing through the corn stalks, the ghostly figures in pursuit. The whispers followed them, filling their minds with terror. Just as Sarah thought she couldn't run any further, they burst into another clearing, gasping for breath. In the center of the clearing stood an old, decrepit farmhouse, its windows like dark, empty eyes. Desperation drove them towards the house, hoping for some semblance of safety. The wooden steps creaked under their weight as they stumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind them. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The furniture was covered in sheets, and the remnants of a life long gone were scattered about. Shadows danced on the walls, forming shapes that seemed almost human. "We need to find something to barricade the door," Mike said, his voice tight with fear. As they moved through the house, Sarah felt a cold presence watching them. The whispers were softer now, almost gentle, but no less unsettling. She found an old photograph on the mantel, showing a family standing proudly in front of the farmhouse. Their faces were blurred, but their eyes seemed to follow her. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was a woman, her face gaunt and ghostly, eyes filled with sorrow and anger. Sarah backed away, her heart pounding. "Leave this place," the woman whispered, her voice echoing in the silence. The friends huddled together, terrified. The ghostly woman raised a hand, and the shadows on the walls began to writhe and twist. The whispers grew louder, the room spinning around them. "Please, we didn't mean to disturb you," Lucy cried, tears streaming down her face. The ghostly woman's expression softened for a moment, but then twisted into one of rage. The shadows lunged at them, and the friends screamed, running for the door. They burst out of the house, racing through the fields, the whispers and shadows in relentless pursuit. As they reached the edge of the fields, the whispers suddenly stopped. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with fear. Behind them, the fields were silent, the moonlight casting an eerie glow over the corn. They never spoke of that night again, but the haunted fields of Blackthorn remained a dark legend in the town. The whispers continued to tell their story, a warning to those who dared to trespass on haunted ground. And the scarecrow, with its sinister grin, stood as a silent guardian, watching over the cursed land.